Armen, President Bashir's ouster has done nothing to quell the protests, has it?
No, it really hasn't. I mean, the protesters, of course, have welcomed the fact that Bashir has gone after nearly 30 years in power. But the announcement that this military council would rule for 2 years, that was greeted with dismay in the streets. Protesters, of course, want civilians to be part of any transition. And they don't want the kind of restrictions that the junta has already enacted, such as the curfew and the national emergency. And they want a path towards internationally monitored elections. That path would have to also involve major political reforms, a review of the constitution, and so on. And all that is very far from the reality today. One has to wonder, Annette, whether the generals have miscalculated, because even before that announcement yesterday, the SPA, the main protest group in Sudan, had said we need a genuine transition and with civilians involved. So they were kind of preempting what they thought was going to be Bashir's ouster. So this idea of a 2-year military transition was clearly not going to satisfy the protesters. And if there's one lesson to take away from Algeria, is that when the security establishment stalls and plays for time, the street just gets louder. And that's what seems to be happening now in Sudan.
And among the international reactions, and the US response, of course, is quite telling. A statement from the State Department, but nothing from the White House at this point.
No, absolutely. Let's have a quick recap of some of the other reactions. So we've had the EU calling for a swift transition to civilian rule, as well as the US, actually. The UN is supposed to have a Security Council session on this crisis this Friday. France is one of the countries that requested that. The US position is interesting. You mentioned the US. Washington was supposed to move towards normalizing ties with Sudan. Now it's in a tricky position because it still wants to engage with Sudan, but it can't really do that very easily if the military are going to be in power for 2 years. The State Department, as you said, put out a statement. Nothing from President Trump so far, and it's perhaps telling that earlier this week he hosted the Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Those are the images we're seeing from the White House from this Tuesday. Perhaps sending a subliminal message there to protesters in Sudan that he's comfortable with authoritarian leaders rather than with Arab Spring-like movements that his predecessor, Barack Obama, had previously supported.
Georgian, thank you.